You think you could have went pro football?
Yeah, for sure.
You think it's an easier transition for basketball players to go to football or football players to go to basketball?
Yeah, I think it's easier, yeah.
For y'all?
Football players can't go play basketball.
You crazy.
No way.
I could take 30 players right now in the NBA and throw them in the NFL. You cannot take 30 NFL players and put them in the NBA.
Whoa. Let's all relax.
Because you're going to break every play. All you got to do is catch the ball and run north or south.
Listen, our sport...
It ain't complex.
This year, Austin Rivers stirred up the hornet's nest and sparked an age-old debate. Which sport is actually easier to go pro in? Is it the NBA or the NFL? In a response to former NFL punter Pat McAfee, who questioned the toughness of basketball players, Rivers went in with a scorching hot take. The claim? 30 active NBA players could play in the NFL right now. So is Austin Rivers right that 30 players in the NBA could go to the NFL? Hit that subscribe button and let's dive in.
They had fun and they won.
Hey, yo, check up.
Before digging too deep into whether Austin Rivers deserves to be crushed or if he has a point, let's not shoot the messenger. Nor should we twist his words to drag him for claiming that he could play in the NFL. That's a trap that JJ Watt ended up falling into. He ripped Austin Rivers without reading past the headline and quickly apologized. So this won't be the roast of Austin Rivers. But let's get into it. First of all, what are the key differences in the sports? The number of jobs is the first thing we have to know. In the NFL, there are a lot more jobs. A 53-man roster multiplied by 32 teams equates to 1,700 positions, whereas the NBA has 15 jobs on 30 rosters, so 450 slots. So technically speaking, the switch to the NFL is easier because there are 4 times the number of spots. That being said, Rivers narrowed his discussion mostly to wide receivers and tight ends, and that's where the majority of NBA players could project. In general, when you take out the massive linemen and specialists, you end up with numbers that aren't all that different. For instance, 92% of offensive linemen are over 300 pounds, a mark that 0 NBA players weigh in at. Really, there's only one position where you might prefer to be in the NFL over the NBA: quarterback. The rules protect you and the careers can last a long time. The contracts are huge, even for backups, and the star power is very real. One more factor, NFL players need to go through 3 years of college, while NBA players have a much quicker pathway to the league with the 1-year requirement. So from all these standpoints, being an NBA player would seem to be the pick for most athletes, outside of quarterbacks. What about the skills for both sports? Footwork, agility, explosiveness, and quickness are huge parts of both sports. Height, while important in football for positions beside running back, is a massive deal in basketball, which is why guys over 6'6" can be a little more deficient athletically. Trust me, watching Draymond Green in spring football practice at Michigan State is ugly. As you'd expect, the average NBA pro is 4 inches taller than their NFL counterpart. And while 21% of the NFL is under 6 feet, only 1% of the NBA is. Raw speed and girth definitely take priority in football. The average NFL player is 29 pounds heavier than the average NBA player. Physical toughness is present in both sports, but there's no question that football takes the cake in that department. The NFL analytics team did a great analysis of the height and weight of players in the two sports. They ID'd 57 players in the NFL with translatable height and weight profiles to the NBA, and just 18 NBA players with the same to the NFL. But I don't want to get too hung up on that, because adding weight is definitely something that NBA players could do.
James Harden definitely had a pregame meal, averaging 7.
The skill level of basketball when it comes to dribbling and shooting is at a different level though. That's not to say there isn't a huge amount of skill in football in elements like catching the ball and positional technique. But what about the mental game? There's no question football demands a ton of players with massive playbooks, intricate game plans, and tons of recall when it comes to assignments and plays. I have to give the edge to football there. Plus, there's a mental element when it comes to the unforgiving nature of football. I don't really want to go too in-depth on this because Shannon Sharpe did go in on it, echoing comments by Ryan Clark. Sharpe admitted that there is no doubt that basketball players are, quote, more skilled. His argument is that football players are just, quote unquote, built different.
President, we need a National Guard. We need as many men as you can spare because we are killing the Patriots.
Essentially with a mental toughness that basketball players don't have. Charles Barkley even agreed with this, calling football a grown man sport and stating that NBA players can't play it.
If I win a ring in the next 3 to 4 years,
You're not going to football.
I'm going to play football.
No, you're not.
So what are some examples of two sports stars that might give us some insight into the discussion? Here are some of the prominent basketball players who thrived at football. LeBron James was a complete stud in his first 2 years of high school football before opting to focus on basketball. He attracted attention from football powerhouses like Ohio State, but I think it's safe to say he made the right choice with basketball. Jalen Suggs was a consensus 4-star quarterback and Mr. Football in Minnesota, but exclusively played hoops in college. Anthony Edwards was famously one of the better youth prospects in football, but quit the sport after Pop Warner. Luke Kennard was a big QB prospect in high school, before abandoning football. But in terms of guys who have actually made the switch, or doubled up in college basketball before committing to professional football, there's a really accomplished list. Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez was a solid reserve for Cal's hoops team, averaging 6 a game over 3 seasons. But he was a standout at football, and the decision was obvious for him as he became a first-round pick and later an all-time great. Jimmy Graham only played 1 season of college football at Miami and was a reserve on the basketball team. And despite catching just 13 passes in his lone collegiate season, he was taken in the 3rd round of the NFL draft and became a 5-time Pro Bowl tight end. Antonio Gates is another famous example. He originally went to Michigan State hoping to play both sports, but Nick Saban was having none of that. Gates transferred to Kent State, where he played basketball and averaged over 20 points a game as a junior. But at 6'4", he was a tweener. He quickly switched his focus to football, and after nailing a tryout with the Chargers, he'd go on to become one of the best tight ends ever. Julius Peppers went to UNC as a prized football recruit and was a walk-on to the hoops team. He averaged a productive 7 points and 4 boards a game in 17 minutes as a sophomore, but he dropped basketball and went on to make 9 Pro Bowls. Donovan McNabb was a seldom-used reserve point guard at Syracuse. Superstar wide receiver Terrell Owens definitely loves basketball, but wasn't able to make much of a dent in college or in the USBL. Clearly, there's a rich history of pretty good, but not NBA-worthy basketball players becoming great NFL players. So you're probably wondering if we have any examples of it going the other way, football prospects becoming great basketball players. Well, the tough news for Austin Rivers haters and for the football players out there is, not really. Charlie Ward is the best we can do. He won the Heisman as the quarterback for a Florida State team that won the national championship. He was no slouch for FSU basketball either, averaging 10.5 a game along with nearly 5 assists and 3 steals as a senior, despite joining the team right after his football season ended. But the NBA, not the NFL, was more impressed with him as a prospect, with Ward sending NFL teams an ultimatum that he would choose basketball over football if they didn't select him in the first round. He was left undrafted. You could argue that at 6'2", 190 pounds, Ward was simply born a generation too early to capture the imagination of NFL scouts where dual-threat quarterbacks have found a home. In the NBA, he became a strong three-point shooter and role player at point guard. It was a bit of a running gag in his career that, as the Jets and Giants continued to roll out awful quarterbacks, maybe the best QB was running point for the Knicks. Next, we have slam dunk champ Nate Robinson. A great what if, because Nate Robinson started at corner as a freshman at Washington and was productive. At 5'9", he was undersized for both sports, but even more so in basketball. Despite that, he focused full-time on it after his freshman year and carved out a long pro career. Could he have been a top corner in the NFL? We'll never know. In the research, those were really the only 2 examples of football to basketball that I could find, which makes it seem like Austin Rivers might be right. I will give a quick shout out to former Panthers receiver Devin Funchess for playing basketball in Columbia now that his football days are over though. To be fair to the football guys, let's toss out some names more in the LeBron or Ant Edwards category. Guys who gave up on football maybe a little too early to completely count them out. Here's a quick look at some guys who excelled at basketball, but who went all in on football before college. The most believable guys to dream about the NBA are the quarterbacks, because that is the one position where picking football over basketball makes sense. So it's worth noting that CJ Stroud was a hooper who battled with Jaime Jaquez in high school. While Jaquez would not confirm that Stroud put up 40 like he claims, Jaquez conceded that Stroud did hit a crazy game winner in the matchup. Patrick Mahomes was a star high school hoops player and to this day looks nice on the floor. Elsewhere, Drake May was a legit high school player and his brother Luke played a key role on UNC's championship team. Eagles Super Bowl hero Nick Foles received strong D1 interest coming out of high school. But at this point, it would be too far gone for these guys to try to catch up and develop skill-wise to find a role in the NBA. On the other hand, guys like Rivers and Ant do have a point. Of course, there's a learning curve in terms of learning playbooks, football technique, and bracing the mind and body for the speed, contact, and danger of playing in the NFL. But it's absolutely feasible that some of the best NBA athletes could make the transition. So I think Rivers has to be given some credit here. While I don't think basketball players are soft by any means, after years removed from playing football and getting used to the NBA, I think the physical aspect might just be too daunting. Maybe there are a few guys that could do it given enough time to train and put on weight. Maybe. So it would be kind of impossible to dream up a starting five in the NBA of NFL players. But we can have some fun the other way. Here's what we're thinking.